Certainly in terms of kind of relationship science and other kind of couples therapy approaches, we know that there are a lot of ingredients that go into making successful relationships work and the kinds of things that therapists can do on the ground. But certainly in terms of the realm specifically to schema therapy, the time has come for I think the field to consolidate and to move towards doing some specific work on it.
Welcome to Every Part of Us. We are two psychologists named Ruth from opposite sides of the world who are passionate about schema couples therapy.
This model provides a powerful and unique toolkit to help therapists work with complexity in couples. So far, the Every Part of Us series is focused on clinical contributions from experts in the schema therapy for couple field. Today, we're going to be taking a different angle to consider the evidence base.
We're excited today to have Professor Gery Karanzas with us. He's a professor in the School of Psychology and a director of the Science of Adult Relationships Laboratory at Deakin University. He's a leading expert in relationships, in exploring how relationships work, in conducting research. And we're really excited to have him talk to us today about schema therapy, schema couples therapy, and the more broad picture of the evidence base for couples therapy. He's edited and authored many, many publications, including the Wiley-Blackwell Handbook of Couples and Family Relationships, as well as books on adult attachment. And he teaches also in a number of areas of relationship science and research methods. So somebody with a lot of expertise and also knowledge of attachment, couples therapy, and schema therapy. So welcome, Gery. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Nice to be with you both.
Hi, Gery. And we were just wondering, from the common factors literature, what do we know are the common ingredients for successful couples therapy?
Yeah, look, if you look at, work that's done, let's say in common factors generally, when we get to couples, there's less work that's done specifically around, let's say, couples therapy and let's say common factors. But some work that has been done would suggest that a lot of the common factors that we see when working individually with clients does apply in couples therapy as well. So not surprisingly, and the big one that jumps out is the therapeutic alliance. That's a huge one. And we know that there's a lot of emphasis placed on that particular factor across many different therapeutic models, but I would argue that schema therapy is one of those models where that is put front and center because of thinking about the therapist as a limited reparenting agent. It's beyond just being an expert in establishing a relationship around the goals and the kind of bond just in general terms. I think it goes deeper than that when you're talking about schema therapy, especially when a therapist is really trying to embody being a stronger, wiser other, an attachment figure, who not only is there to try and broaden and build the individual, but is also there to provide comfort and to know when to kind of empathically confront the client. Some would argue, well, lots of therapies do that, but I think there is a special emphasis that's put on it in schema therapy that is different to so many other kind of therapeutic models. But with that, though, with couples therapy, this notion of establishing a therapeutic alliance, I think, is a more challenging pursuit and more challenging endeavor. And the reason is you're needing to establish a therapeutic alliance with two people that may have very different opinions around why they're coming to couples therapy, whether they should be there, about their own knowledge around, the couples therapy approach one is taking, what other evidence they may have examined or looked at. So you're really needing to relate to two people. And we know that one of the reasons why couples come to therapy is because of the differences that exist between them. And those differences get in the way of how they see relationship problems. That's why they become problems in the first place. What were once these endearing quirks and features of one another that they would call complementary now become the features that drive each other mad and that are basically saying to you as a therapist, look, I'm fine, but can you fix them with all of their faults and foibles? So, threading the needle around how to become, a stronger, wiser other for both clients, I think is a unique challenge to couples therapy. But then, if we think about the various therapeutic approaches that exist out there and what we're trying to model as therapists, is ultimately to enhance the alliance between the couple themselves, couple members, where they can turn to each other as a healthy adult and as a limited reparenting agent. In attachment terms, we'd say, well, we want our partner to be our stronger, wiser other. And when a partner isn't that becomes a real challenge and another reason for why couples come to therapy. So this idea of a therapeutic alliance, well, everyone would say, well, yes, of course. But delivering and succeeding on a strong therapeutic alliance on the ground is, I think, a particularly challenging one for couples therapists generally. So that's one that I would say. Another one around it for common factors that is a unique one to couples therapy is the ability to hold a stance within reason of neutrality, i.e., that I'm not siding with one client more than another. Because then we create, issues around alienation, favoritism. It's then the client, at least one of the clients, won't see you as seeing things through a clear set of eyes that can't be the truth teller. So that is a particular aspect that's unique to couples therapy. So the ability for the therapist to be as neutral as possible within reason. We know that there are times where we just need to call out the way that a particular member of the couple is behaving, or maybe some of the challenges that we're experiencing relate more to a particular client in the couple, and we need to confront those things. But we could even do that in an individual session with a client. We could say, well, this is not to become a spectacle in the couple session. Let's do it individually. So that is one that is unique. Another big common factor is actually the clients themselves. So if clients come again with particular kind of biases about what kind of therapy they think is best for the couple, or if they've looked at particular evidence, or they're very skeptical or have had bad experiences in the past, they can act as barriers that get in the way of being able to do good therapeutic work, because you're likely within schema therapy terms to have a bunch of kind of avoidant coping modes being activated. And if you're triggering particular sensitive issues, you may even get things like a bully attack mode and other things kind of coming at you as a therapist. So, and what would be argued in couples therapy is actually the biggest common factor is actually the client. Because clients that are already kind of considering kind of divorce or thinking of ending the relationship will really have these very negative, biased views of their partner. We really do have our work cut out for ourselves as therapists, because we're essentially needing to constantly challenge these biases. And sometimes at least what I've seen with some couples, not the majority, but there would be a small proportion. Well, what they do is they come into couples therapy to exonerate themselves that they've tried all they can to save the relationship, but they're really using it as a vehicle to say, I want to end it now, and I would like you to do it for me, or I want to use this as the forum with which we do it. But they can come in with the pretense that they're working on it. But actually, when you get through the kind of that saying or that phrasing on face value, you go, actually, that's not the real reason that you're here. You're not trying to save this. So this ability of what the client brings is another kind of really important common factor. Is another element that's kind of especially challenging within couples therapy work, because you've got two people that you're needing to negotiate that with.
Just as you're saying that, Gery, it's reminding me, one of the things we're thinking about as schema therapists is what mode someone's in when they're walking in the, perhaps they're in that detached protector or even avoidant protector mode, where they really aren't in the room. They might be physically there, but they're emotionally
Right.
detached, or not willing to come, or as you say, perhaps already checked out of the relationship, but really wanting to do
Mhm.
due diligence or look like the good guy, or so we're really trying to think through what is the mode someone's turning up to therapy in, is it their healthy adult, or how much healthy adult is there? Which I guess raises that question. You know, you're talking about some of the research that tells us about successful couples therapy, and we're thinking about schema therapy. How much research is there? What is the current evidence base for schema couples therapy?
So if we're directly talking about research that's been done specifically on schema therapy for couples, let's say randomized control trials, even some other kind of intervention work, essentially there really isn't any work. There might be the odd study that's looked at particular components of schema therapy within couples, but if we're talking about, really kind of top tier kind of evidence that's been conducted and that's highly relevant, direct, a test of the schema therapy model within couples is pretty much non-existent. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't work. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have a role. It doesn't mean that it's not an intervention worth pursuing. But we do need to just take stock and just be mindful of the fact that the evidence doesn't exist. So really, that in and of itself provides, an opportunity for us all, those of us that are doing research. It's a bit of a call to arms to say, well, we know that there are so many components of the schema therapy model that have good evidence around them in individual psychotherapy. What can we do as a field moving forward in order to start to run kind of couples trials and develop, whether they be randomized control trials, even if they're just kind of basic kind of trials that are pre-post, let's say, interventions, at least that's a start. But the ability to be able to do that kind of work is important. In order to start to establish an evidence base where, as schema therapists, can talk confidently about what the evidence is to support it. Because we also know that one of the barriers that we can get from couples, and I'm certainly seeing that increasingly in my own practice with couples, is those that already come armed with a bunch of evidence or their own research that they've been doing around reading things. And the ability to be able to either comfort them or to confront them around what they're reading and whether they should be really leaning into that or whether they should be trusting the therapist and what the therapist knows is something that can be an important starting point for the therapeutic relationship, as we just discussed. So really, it is a call to arms around the schema therapy model. Certainly in terms of kind of relationship science and other kind of couples therapy approaches, we know that there are a lot of ingredients that go into making successful relationships work and the kinds of things that therapists can do on the ground. But certainly in terms of the realm specifically to schema therapy, yeah, the time has come for I think the field to consolidate and to move towards doing some specific work on it.
Yeah, thanks, Gery. I was wondering if you're doing any particular projects along those lines in terms of the schema therapy for couples approach.
We are. The work is emerging and it is still in progress, but there is some really interesting work that we're doing. A partner of yours in crime, Ruth Holt, and I are involved in some work with Paul Perez, Pam Pilkington, looking at as a very kind of basic question, which is, are there particular ways that we can assess and provide feedback to couples around their partner's ability to be able to meet their, some of their kind of core needs and to do so within the domain of disconnection and rejection? That is, how can a partner engage in behaviors that can reduce the activation of those schemas that sit within the disconnection rejection domain, which is a central domain, for human functioning generally, but in particular within relationships, because we're talking about secure attachment, nurturance, guidance. We're essentially locking in on whether we have close others in our lives that function as stronger and wiser others, that can act in ways that are sensitive and responsive to our needs, right? And that's core. That's the cornerstone, actually, of secure attachment. This phrasing that's often used: sensitive and responsive. So when we unpack that, well, what do we mean by that? Well, it's about detecting that there is something going on with our partner that needs our attention. B, it's about evaluating what it is that they need. C, It's doing it at the right time and at the right place. And the last thing is that we actually deliver support that meets their need. That is, we do what they want, as opposed to sometimes doing things that you think the partner needs or what should be done, what is in their best interest, versus tuning in, i.e. attunement, into what it is that they need. So the work that we've kind of been doing is trying to get a sense for what would be the partner responses that would address and lower the activation of some of those core schemas, whether it be emotional deprivation, mistrust, abuse, and so on and so on. People know what's in disconnection rejection domain. And so, in working with Ruth, Paul, and Pam on this, we've developed a measure that Paul presented at Schema Therapy conference last year, where it seems to be relatively reliable, well validated. We're doing a bit more work in it, and we find that it is associated with many different aspects of relationship functioning. So when a partner is able to do a better job of addressing some of the core concerns around these different schemas that make up disconnection and rejection, we find that relationship quality is higher. People feel more happy in their relationships. They feel more satisfied. They certainly feel more trusting of their partners, of their relationships in general. They experience greater kind of sexual satisfaction. They experience higher commitment. Their basic psychological needs seem to be met to a higher extent, and that's using the need satisfaction measure that's used in self-determination theory, etc. And the list kind of goes on and on and on, right? Greater intimacy, they experience their partners as being more supportive, which is, a nice way to validate, to go, well, clearly if the partner is doing things that should be supportive, you as a person should say, yes, my partner is a more supportive person. So the perceptions are, yes, my partners are more supportive. So, we've got a few studies that we've done on that where we've cross-validated the findings and they're looking quite consistent. So, we're in the process of just finalizing our analyses around those things, and then we'll move towards starting to kind of write some of this up. But I guess in some ways, this would be some of the kind of first or early work that's kind of directly targeting the schema therapy model and situating it within a bunch of different kind of relationship factors that we know exist out there in relationship science, and seeing what happens when you tend to people's schemas and disconnection rejection. What does it actually do on the ground to the many different parts that make relationships positive, high functioning, and keep them sustainable over time?
Yeah, I think that's going to be an exciting progression in the schema therapy world if we've got a measure that can start to really give some feedback to couples on how they go at meeting those core needs, how their partner reports them as meeting them or not, and maybe even targeting them some areas to work on in the couples therapy. One of the
Absolutely.
I think you've done a really interesting, some interesting work on, Gery, is thinking about attachment style and limited reparenting, because I think that's one of the really interesting intersections of that huge body of attachment literature. And as you said before, a key therapy approach that we have in schema therapy. And I guess I wondered if we could even, we can talk about it. We might even do a role play. We'll see how we go on when you've got someone in the room with maybe in a more avoidant attachment style, what limited reparenting might look like or not look like, versus someone with a more anxious attachment style. Is there anything you want to share on that kind of broad topic?
We can, yeah. And certainly in the couples therapy work that I do, I do measure attachment. Like, it's been one of the main areas that we've done studies on now for the last kind of 20 years. That was really the guiding framework that got us into relationship science generally. And with Rita Yunan, we've been kind of doing some courses and PD around kind of that integration, taking more of an attachment-informed approach to schema therapy, but I do it with couples, as well. So, and yes, there absolutely, I think, are some kind of important aspects to working with people that vary on the two broad dimensions that make up attachment styles. So the extent to which people are high and low on attachment anxiety, and the extent to which they're high and low on attachment avoidance. And then you get those that are high on both, right? Which presents another challenge unto itself. But let's say if we're going with people who are high on avoidance. So let's think about the characteristic features that make up attachment avoidance. And here we're talking about adult attachment styles. Okay, so we're talking about people's conscious representations of how it is that they behave, they think, and they feel in their romantic relationships, right? So let's talk about that. So with their, romantic partner, which is important to kind of highlight that, in adulthood, those of us that are in romantic relationships, our romantic partners typically become our primary attachment figures. They become our go-to, stronger, wiser others that we turn to in times of both strain, but also in times of kind of joy and happiness and want to kind of celebrate particular things, right? So when those relationships aren't going well, it's not surprising that there's this kind of high degree of distress and this vexation in clients, okay? But let's say we've got someone who's high on attachment avoidance, and let's work with the prototypes. Let's just talk about high rather than anywhere in between because it's easier to kind of explain. So people that are high on attachment avoidance can be characterized as having a discomfort with kind of emotional disclosure and with intimacy, right? That's not to say they don't want it. It's just that they have real trouble with it. And because they actually find it quite distressing and challenging and don't know what to do with it, they then can withdraw or not engage in the first place. So that's one element. A discomfort with emotional closeness, with disclosure, with intimacy. The other element is that they can be excessively self-reliant. I am my own best friend. I can do everything myself. I don't need anyone's help. And because of that, I can see myself as being quite accomplished, right? Sometimes I can overcompensate in that way, in the way that I see myself as being very accomplished, right? For some people high in attachment avoidance, you can also have this idea where they dismiss the importance of relationships. But that's more of what we would call a dismissing avoidance. Most, couples that I see and most people that that I work with don't register particularly high on that aspect, that characteristic of attachment avoidance. They might have a discomfort with emotional closeness and intimacy, etc., but they still value relationships. But there are those core people that dismiss and say, look, they're not worth their time and effort. You don't really need to invest much in them, right? So that can be another characteristic feature for some, right? The other kind of element that ties a lot of those things together is just a chronic distrust of other people. So that there can be a suspicion. Now, the reason why people high in attachment avoidance typically have these kind of features is because historically, not just in their early life experiences with caregivers, mum, dad, and other attachment figures, but even in many of their romantic relationships, as they've developed as in adulthood, they have experienced consistent rejection. So anytime that they've tried to be emotionally vulnerable, anytime where they've reached out seeking help, they've basically been told, do it yourself. They've been made out as if they're foolish to ask for help, that they should be able to do it themselves. So they've essentially been negatively evaluated or they've just been ignored. And so these people develop these very strong defensive processes. Right, so one thing that underpins attachment avoidance is a high degree of this defensive processing. What do we mean by that? Two things. Number one, don't let the distress get out of control. Keep a lid on it from the beginning, because if I can keep on the lid on it, I can manage it. I can control it. So if we're talking in schema world, what are we talking about? Lots of emotional inhibition, right? Don't let anyone in as to what's going on, but also if I start to acknowledge what's going on, then I start to unravel. So let's just keep a lid on it. So because of that, they will often try to suppress distress, or if they think there's a threat coming online, they see something worries them, they try to avoid the distress as well, right? So, thinking about that as an avoidant coping mode, let's say, okay? However, the other thing that, they can kind of do is talk up their competence and their capability, because that means that I don't need you. I'm fine. I'm okay, right? So in attachment terms, we talk about this as defensive self-enhancement. A fancy way to say that I'm going to prop myself up, even artificially in the eyes of others, just so that I seem good on the outside and to convince myself that I am, when inside I may be more vulnerable than I want to admit or that I want to let on, right? And I can do that with romantic partners. I don't need you. I can do this myself, right? But also their ability then to be able to care for a partner is distressing to them. And it comes across to the partner. The romantic partner will think of it like they don't care, they're not interested, they can't feel. And yet once you get under all of that, we go, actually, there's a lot going on under there that they just don't want to express. So if we're talking about working with some of these people, the minute that you go to the place of highlighting these vulnerabilities, you get resistance. You'll either get this reinforcement of an avoidant coping mode. You get some kind of detached protector like, or if they really feel like the session is not going in the direction that they want, but you're kind of wanting to pursue it, you could get a bully attack mode back at you, where essentially they will try to cut off the conversation, or they'll make you feel incompetent, or that you're wasting their time, right? They're paying you, but really you should be paying them, right? Or they may start to bring into the session all of their understanding of attachment, right? That they really know where they're at with all of this, okay? So one way to kind of work on these things that Rita and I talk about is, okay, well, if we know that they have typically been rejected in the past, to be made to feel foolish, and a way to compensate for that is to exaggerate their capabilities, their skills. One way to kind of bypass those things is actually to lock in on their competence and capabilities, and for them to be viewing therapy as another way to kind of enhance their competencies and capabilities. And the reason that they're here, let's say with a partner, is because they're wanting to make their relationship successful, and relationships mean something to them, right? So then it's the idea of that in sessions is to get them to see them being a bit more disclosing, or to be a bit more vulnerable as a strength, and they're strengthening another side of them, right, that can be explored in kind of the therapeutic kind of sessions, right? So that's one way to kind of approach it, right? So instead of locking in on these things as vulnerabilities, is to flip them as exploring these things adds to the broadening and building, adds to capability, adds to strength, as to, being able to show others what a stronger, wiser other you can be, right? So that's one element to it. The other element is empathic confrontation, which is risky for some. So this is where the therapeutic alliance needs to have been established, right? So we need to have sensitivity, responsiveness, good attunement, etc. Because what we know with most people that have an insecure attachment, especially those who are avoidant, is this kind of, mental narrowing. They have this kind of really kind of small focus, where they don't realize sometimes that their own behaviors and the way that they are going on in the session is actually affecting another person. Because all of these behaviors are self-perpetuating, just as they are if we talk about them in the schema therapy world, right? So that, I can be standoffish, I can judge you harshly as a way to back off, but you don't realize what it is that you are doing, because underpinning, attachment styles to some extent are these internal working models, right? Which are often operating unconsciously. We're not even aware that we're doing particular things. So, you have a therapist who is being made to feel as if that they're silly, that they're raising things that aren't going to go anywhere. You try to do an imagery rescripting with them where you're wanting to kind of access some vulnerable negative emotions. They go, no, it's not landing. Or this seems silly, or they're going, yep, and they give you a one line as an emotion, and that's it. They're just kind of letting you fledge away. And they're starting to make you feel like, you're not doing the best job. But the ability at times to kind of call out the resistance and say, so again, and also trying to bypass coping modes. Like, you're a pretty smart individual here. You know that this is not working. And I know it's not working. And we need to talk about why. And we need to talk why you're here and why I'm getting this pushback and not getting anywhere with you. Let's just partner up and work this thing out. So the ability to start to empathically kind of confront, but raise it, can be a very powerful tool, especially with avoidant individuals. Because the other thing that we find, providing that the therapeutic alliance is strong, is that they will often soften, or they will come away surprised and shocked to go, really? Why am I making you feel like that? They won't even be aware. Their ability to engage in that reflective functioning, that mentalization to know what another person could be feeling, is really low. And we know with avoidant people, their ability to experience emotions, to recall an emotion, and the level at which they experience it is shallow. And that doesn't just go for negative emotions. That can also be for positive emotions. We know that from a lot of the research that's been done around kind of the emotions experienced by people with different attachment styles when recalling memories, right? So they have shallow affect. So sometimes that agitation is necessary to awaken them in a way to go, oh my goodness, am I making you feel that way? Or is that, hey, is that the opinion that you have of yourself because of me? And funnily enough, once you start to go there, they actually can feel quite remorseful. They can turn around and say, am I making you feel like that? No, that's not my intent here, right? But then you have something to work with, right? Or what you'll do is next time you see them in session, they'll be a bit softer. You won't get as much pushback. They seem to listen more. The feeling in the room is different. So that's one thing that you can do with people who are high on attachment avoidance as well. But you've got to make sure that you have a strong, working alliance with someone to be able to do that, right? Because essentially you're leveraging that you are the stronger, wiser other, and that this client has established a relationship with you where you can test it in ways where that challenge is necessary.
All right. Well, Gery, I love the theory of how you might do this, but let's see it in practice. What about
Mm-hmm.
if we play a couple? Ruth might be that avoidant partner who really doesn't want to do anything vulnerable. Maybe it is very uncomfortable in a therapy dynamic. Are you happy to show us how you would do what you just described?
We can sure give it a go, that's for sure.
All right. Well, let's start the session.
Well, nice to see you both. And, I gave you some homework last week, right? Which was about, you both kind of sitting down and just trying to have a hard discussion with one another, one of those real kind of difficult topics that we've spoken about in the last few sessions. And I asked you to go away and have one. It didn't need to be very long, could have been 5 to 10 minutes, but of devoted time where you were going to sit and just try and hear each other out and try and see each other's point of view on it, which I've told you before. I think you both kind of have merit in the way you're kind of looking at this. So I'm wondering how it went. Why don't you tell me about how this exercise went for the two of you?
When you say hear each other out, what do you mean by that? I don't really understand.
Well, in the last session that we had together, we said about, giving each other the opportunity to talk or express how it is that you feel about that particular conflict that you were discussing last time. So it was about you being able to put your point of view across uninterrupted, but then for your partner to be able to do the same. And what we asked you to do is for each of you to be able to hear each other out and to kind of see if you could tune in and kind of see it from the other person's point of view and talk about that with one another.
Yeah, I don't really, I mean, it's, I appreciate you trying to help us, but this whole tuning in thing, I don't really, I don't, I don't really understand what that means. Sorry.
Okay. Well, it's listening to what your partner is saying, right? Not only the words, but, the tone of their voice. Are they seeming to get emotional? How important does this issue seem to them? And also, while that's going on, for you to think about what's going on in you at the time as you're reacting to your partner.
But I am listening. I'm listening to Ruth's tone of voice, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, Ruth, don't I listen to you.
Well, you were on your phone for a lot of it. So I don't think there was a lot of, I don't know. I mean, you can repeat what I said, sure, but not
Yeah,
much
but you're,
beyond
you're
that.
you're on your phone as well. I mean, and I am listening to you around that, and yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Like if I'm hearing both of you talk then about it, seems to me that you're observing some things. And I think the thing that you're observing in one another is that maybe you're not being as in tune as what you could be. Like, let me ask you this question. Why were you each looking at your phone when you were sitting down to do the task? Like we did say that what we'd like you to do is to do it in a way where you're not distracted, where you're looking at each other, where you're kind of able to talk to each other face to face. I think there's a bit of a challenge having a phone in the way of that.
I mean, well, we have to do the chores, Joey. It's quite busy. We're very, very busy. We've got the kids, and I was just catching up on shopping, and I mean, this is another thing we thought that I don't think you realise that's the other bit of it. I'm actually busy doing all our admin. So Joey, I mean, to be honest, all this attunement stuff, I don't really know how useful it is. We just need some help, don't we, Ruth, in just not arguing. Just give us some strategies, just give us some techniques. That's all we need.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the crux of it. I think this business of sort of trying to feel Ruth's feelings, I don't get it, to be honest, and don't really see the value.
Okay, but I think one of the reasons that you both came to see me was that you both wanted these additional strategies. You wanted to find ways to be able to improve your relationship. And let's be honest, the reason that you both come to see me is because it matters to both of you, right? But what I'm hearing here is that, you're kind of really busy and you're feeling really challenged by the world around you. But I also know that the reason that you're able to kind of keep so many balls in the air is because you're also really, really capable and that you invest in the things that matter to you and that you're actually making time to come here and see me because this relationship does matter to you. So, and I know that you're both kind of pretty clever people. And I know that there have been times where we've had some really excellent sessions where I know that both of you have been paying attention not only to what I've been saying, but to each other as well. And really, that's all I'm asking you to do. Because I know when I've had individual sessions with each of you, the big challenge, the big thing that you both tell me, and you can tell it to me really clearly, really, really clearly, it's so loud in my heart and mind when I hear it, is you don't feel like the other listens or cares. But I've got two people here online with me, and the reason you're here is because you do care. So I'm just wondering, what kind of reactions do you have when I sit here and reflect back the things that I've observed in each of you and the kind of things that I know really matter to you and why you're here?
Yeah, I mean, that feels nice. That feels nice to hear you, Jerry. So you acknowledge that I'm doing my bit here, and I am trying for Ruth. That's important.
And when you're like that, that's what I want. That's the kind of conversation I wanted to have the other night.
So I think, and it's interesting, right? The big thing that I pick up on just now is the minute that one of you genuinely turns around and says that you want to be there for the other, what happened? Immediately, the other partner wanted to say something, wanted to kind of reach out and say, yeah, that does matter, and that's all I really want. So the funny thing is that just now, in this really kind of fleeting kind of moment, you could say, you actually did tune in and you wanted to express something important to your partner, that you do want to put in effort. And I know that you know that. And I know that deep down you want this relationship to work. And really what you hear is to kind of upskill yourself in ways that make you competent in relationships, just like you are in other areas of your life. So I'm just wondering, you tell me, you're clever people, you tell me, if you were to have another go at that activity for next time, and I know you will because you're very studious with lots of other things that you do, and you did try it. I know you tried it. What do you think you'd want to do to make that activity better? You tell me, you be my therapist. What do you reckon you could do to make it work?
Well, maybe you're right. Maybe we need to put the phones away and listen a bit more.
Let me ask you this. How often are you surrounded by people that have their phones up and you really got something important to say, but you just don't feel like they're listening?
Yeah, quite a lot in our house, isn't it, Ruth?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I'll
And
put
we know
mine.
that you're not alone.
Well, I'll
Lots
put
of
mine
us do it.
down. You put yours down, Ruth.
You want to put your weapons down, do you? See,
We'll
you're
pause-
battling a common enemy.
We'll pause
Alrighty.
there.
All right.
Thanks
How
so
was
much,
that?
Gery. I think you've resolved our avoidant attachment right there.
If only it was so simple.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Gery. It's been, fascinating to hear all about your work and details of Gery's work. And if you wanted to contact him, can be found on relationshipscience.com, Gery? Just wanted to check.
Relationshipscienceonline.com,
Great.
or you can contact me through Deakin University School of Psychology too. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much, Gery. We really appreciate your time. That was so good.
Yeah, my pleasure.